Hey guys, it's Project Dave playing some Ace Attorney Apollo Justice Trilogy. So this is recorded about a week before the game comes out. The footage is, but the actual voice recording is from the day of the embargo, so that should make it legal as far as I know. What else to say? So for the embargo, it has to be under 20 minutes, and I have to talk over the video, so I'll be talking over all these. The first game does not have that much voice acting, so it doesn't really matter for the first game. For the second and third game, it will be me talking over cutscenes. And I can't show the back three cases of each game, basically. So I'm just going to do the first, essentially the first 20 minutes of each game of the first mission. So there's alternate outfits for the second and third games, but not for the first game. For the second two games, it's basically just a cutscene the whole time, but for this game, there'll be a little bit of gameplay. So when we get to the gameplay part, I can sort of talk about what's going on there. But my experience with Phoenix Wright in the past is almost exclusively limited to Marvel vs. Capcom 3. So that's my knowledge of Phoenix Wright in a nutshell. That and just general gaming pop culture at the time of it coming out. Like pointing and saying objection, that sort of thing. But so far the game seems pretty charming. We'll get into episode 1 here. So I'm not specifically aware of whether this is actually the first Phoenix Wright game, or if it's an alternate series that introduces Phoenix Wright, because the introduction of Phoenix Wright in this game is kind of unusual if you're just thinking that he's automatically a lawyer, which he is in the other two games. But in this game, he's like undercover or something. I don't know, I haven't got to that part. I'm also not supposed to show the back half of the case, but since I'm only showing the first 20 minutes of the case, it doesn't really matter that much. Oh, so I don't think there's voice acting here. So in the next two games, there'll be a scene like this, but the whole thing will be animated entirely. Whereas this is more like 999 or what have you, like a 999 versus Virtue's Last Reward situation, as far as the level of animation change between the first game and the second game. Same concept. The game is basically a virtual novel, but there's some amount of decision making and puzzle solving to it, for all intents and purposes. If you're wondering why I have to talk over it, it's because it's a visual novel. Them's the bricks. And also it's pre-release. So each of the first cases in each game is presented in a way where you will have a pseudo-tutorial explaining what's going on. In this case, we'll actually get to the tutorial phases before the 20 minutes are over. I could make a series of 20-minute videos about each case, at least for the first 3 cases. Because this will be up like a day and a half before the game comes out, something like that. So that is the thing I can do, but I'll keep it to just 20 minutes of me blabbing. So enjoy. What is the main? This guy does not show up in the following game. I don't know what happens to him, or at least not at the very beginning. Maybe he shows up late, who could say. But is there a last minute plot twist? Does it turn out to be Zero? What could it be? Zerp, as they say. I guess the traditional thing to do with virtual novel games is to read the text aloud. And my voice is decent enough for doing that. It's just not really my raison d'etre. I'd rather make commentary than simply read literally what is being said on a personal level. Of course, with the following games, it'll be voice acted, so it's going to clash somewhat with me talking. Inevitably. What a disaster. But we're moving to the courtroom shortly here, and we'll see the judge has this very impressive beard and looks on stoically, but he has like really ridiculous facial expressions every so often. And overall, the game is very charming as far as the general approach to information. And seemingly respect for the sacrosanct nature of lawyers and so forth. You'll notice the game really likes the justice pun. It also likes this punching noise every so often that punch comes out. Thematic noises, onomatopoeia, glorious. So in each game, the first opponent or lawyer who's facing you is this guy who always has this really silly animation where he bonks his forehead with his palm. And it's always like a relative of the same guy. Always looks like the same guy. It's like, I'm his brother, and I will defeat you, Phoenix Wright. Or in this case, Apollo Justice. So extremely anime villain, basically. Even though it's just a opposing lawyer. I guess in dramatic context, usually the opposing lawyer is somehow vilified relative to the other side. Not in like a TV drama setting, but in a movie setting that happens a lot. Such as Gene Hackman in Runaway Jury, for example. This is less of a thing in A Few Good Men. In A Few Good Men, Kevin Bacon is generally somewhat supportive of Tom Cruise's efforts, in as much as that's possible. Like, he's not directly subversive to him. I'm trying to think of if there is a context in The Firm where they're actually in a courtroom, or if the entire thing is just backroom drama. I'm pretty sure the whole thing is backroom drama with very little court cases. There's like a tiny little bit of court case action there. So the villains aren't necessarily the opposing attorney in that. But as far as where would Phoenix Wright be taking inspiration from? Probably various random animes, and then XYZ, what is it? John Grisham? John Grisham focus. I want to say John Mearsheimer, which is famous name right now, but notably not John Grisham. I did actually read 2 or 3 John Grisham books when I was younger. The Pelican Brief, that's a good one. Starring Julia Roberts and Denzel Washington, I think, in the movie version, but the book is also entertaining. I may have read The Firm, and I read A Time to Kill, I think, or at least most of A Time to Kill, and I've seen XYZ number of. So if you grew up in the 90s, you've seen every 90s movie that ever existed just by default. So a lot of those movies are either John Grisham, or Michael Crichton. Of course, Michael Crichton did Jurassic Park, but the Andromeda Strain, etc., etc. Crichton is like, these are both, I'd say middle brow to low brow is the way to describe it, but Michael Crichton is, he has extremely good ideas for details and that sort of thing, like atmosphere building, and then the plot, the whole cohesion of the story never really makes it much sense. Like, if you're trying to compare Michael Crichton to Cormac McCarthy, for example, now they're leagues and leagues apart. It's not really that much of a comparison, but in the modern era, there are very few extremely good authors. They exist, to be sure, but they will all be purged out by AI before too long. So you can be a really good author, that's a possibility, but nobody is ever going to read anything you write as a really good author. You're just going to be someone who writes things that are enthralling and interesting and have 5 people read them in the history of mankind. And that number will probably go down over time, like the number of people you can get to read something. And then there'll be like a universal distrust of that sort of thing, because everyone will assume that if something is well written, it must be written by AI. So the target will be something that is less well less well written, so it doesn't seem like it's written by AI, if that makes sense. That's not where the state is right now, but it'll just give it some time, give it 20 years. That's where we're headed toward, where any and all creative arts or information-based things, anything that could be auto-generated will be auto-generated, and any job that can be replaced will be replaced inevitably until we're in Wall-E state, basically, meaning the people don't do anything except consume and exist and have no other purpose. Now, we could have a nuclear apocalypse before that happens. Holding out for the nuclear apocalypse. Nuclear apocalypse is pretty unlikely, but massive world-spanning wars, pretty likely. Not world-spanning. Localized massive wars in theater in proxy form, with lots of fancy tools being thrown at each other. Mostly drones. That's the big thing. So somehow we got to this tangent. I was wondering when my brain would flow to tangential nature, but here we are. So the main deterrent, since nuclear weapons are not really a deterrent anymore, since the taboo has been broken of war in Eastern Europe, etc. Nuclear weapons in general have no particular great purpose unless a very small nation has them. Because a very small nation, that might be their only defense, so they would use nuclear weapons if they had the opportunity. So if a small nation can get nuclear weapons, then it matters to them. For large nations, it doesn't matter because they don't have any willingness to use them, for fear of getting obliterated, obviously. Therefore, nuclear weapons are not a deterrent, so what is the next deterrent down from that? And it can't be just conventional force. Conventional force is not enough. The relation of conventional force between you and your opponent will always shift up and down. It can never be like even above 90% to 10% for very long. That's just an impossibility in a pure competition world. But there exists the possibility of a doom drone. There's also like an internet nuke. You can kind of envision it like an EMP that just knocks out the internet and thus obliterates all functional infrastructure in the society. These are the two main deterrents that exist. The internet nuke, the problem with it is it will probably backfire and screw over your own society, so that's why people don't do that, or haven't done that yet. Russia seems to be the most likely to do that in the future. But the drone, this is like a drone that has purely conventional weapons, but will attack and destroy anything that moves. It's kind of like a Gundam or whatever mech kind of illusion you want to apply to it. It's not that ridiculous. It's just a big drone that can obliterate everything that comes at it. And it will be AI driven, of course, but I don't think there's a scenario where this AI backfires and tries to take over of its own volition. There will always be a fail-safe that prevents that from happening. Nobody's stupid enough, in theory, nobody's stupid enough to design an AI that will actually go rampant. For now. Even things like terrorist groups are not... There's no real anarchic terrorist group. There's no actual Joker. That's not a thing. As of yet. At least not... There might be individuals that are like that, but not like whole societies. Not societies, but large groups of people that congregate. They're not going to be that disruptive. They might have a blood-sworn enemy. They're not going to be like, let's set up a rampant AI drone. And you need those kinds of resources if you're going to let that happen. So that one, that's unlikely. This doom and gloom scenario. However, the doom drone, if it did exist, you do have to demonstrate that it works. So there has to be a Hiroshima, for example. But if you're using it in like a generic war context, say the defense of Taiwan. So in theory, this Doom drone shoots down all the LSTs, landing ship tank, amphibious assault vehicles that try to land on the Taiwanese shore. This is not going to happen. They're not going to happen soon. If it happens, it would happen in 20 or 30 years. But that's the theoretical goal of all AI development in a military context, is something like that. You might need like 10 of these or 15 of these or 20 of these to do it. But in theory, you would test it as one or two at a time to start with. And then it has to be so overwhelming that the opponent backs off. Which was timed with Phoenix Red slapping here. So there you go. I did eventually get to a point where I meandered off into interesting discussions. So anyway, thanks for watching the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Dude in the hoodie, or dude in the beanie is Phoenix Wright, as you'll see. Well, I guess that doesn't happen. But in the next game, suddenly there'll be Phoenix Wright. So that's where it came from, somehow. I don't really understand the context of that, but it's cool. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll edit these clips together so they make some amount of sense. Well, the first 5 minutes will make sense, and then you'll have this long rambling tangent. But quite eloquent and magnificent, I must say. Beautiful. And have a good one.